I think a lot of focus after Latson transferred was obviously on MiLaysia. And I mean, let's be real, fans were saying that she should transfer, all season long. A lot of people wanted to write their own narratives about Dawn and MiLaysia's relationship. And for me, it was tricky because I had written that feature in December talking to Dawn and Steph Curry and MiLaysia's mom about South Carolina. And I do believe that they were honest in saying that this was the program that was for her. That doesn't mean things won't change in the next 6 months in the era of NIL and the transfer portal. Nothing's ever going to be the same.
Welcome into South Carolina Sideline, everybody. I am Matt Dowell, and I am so excited because we're expanding our podcast, and we have our first guest in studio. So before I introduce our very esteemed guest here today on our podcast, I just want to tell you guys how our podcast is expanding. We've been releasing new episodes every Tuesday, and we will keep doing that with our Watch Fox team. That's me, Claire Foley, and Jared Parker. So we're still going to discuss all of the hottest topics on Tuesdays, and then every Thursday, I'll be doing an interview with somebody in the Gamecock community about their lives. It can be journalists, it can be athletes, coaches, whoever it is. So every Thursday we'll be dropping an interview. We'll go in depth, behind the scenes, all that good stuff. So look forward to new episodes every Tuesday and now every Thursday. So let's get to our first guest on South Carolina Sideline. I'm so excited. She's my friend. She's an A+ journalist, and I don't tell everybody that. If I tell you that, I really mean it. Lulu Kesin of the Greenville News. Lulu, welcome to South Carolina Sideline.
That was the sweetest introduction. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm truly honored and just so happy to be here.
Well, we're so happy to have you in studio. I'm new to the podcasting game, so it's been a lot of fun to dive into this medium. And I know Lulu works for the Greenville News, which is a print outlet. So, I'm TV, Lulu's print, and I'm excited to dive into the differences of those worlds. But today, Lulu's going to talk to us about her journey as a journalist. She's also going to dive into breaking the MiLaysia Fulwiley transfer story, because that was Lulu that got that scoop. And we're going to talk about some fun behind the scenes stuff as well. So before we get into all the tea, Lulu, that everyone wants to know, let's just talk about how you got started in this industry. How did you get started as a journalist, from school to now to where you are in Columbia?
Well, I played sports my entire life, so I always loved sports. And then around junior year of high school, my high school had a weekly news broadcast. Shout out Jeremy Whalen, our teacher. He truly invested in just kind of student storytelling and allowed a lot of students to create with different mediums. And so long story short, they needed a sports broadcaster for their weekly segment. In my town, I'm from Northampton, and it was called Hamped Up. So
amazing name.
Yeah. And so I hadn't really done anything journalistically before, got into that, and I truly just loved it. It was your world. It was broadcasting. It was, on camera, teleprompter, mic, all that stuff. And then I went to Emerson College for a semester. Didn't love it, just didn't fit the kind of school vibe for me, and then I transferred to UMass Amherst, and that's kind of where I got into print journalism. I picked up beat reporting. I covered D1 sports on that campus, and I really fell in love with all of it. I'm truly fortunate. I say all the time, the second that I discovered sports writing, I never wanted to stop, and a lot of college kids kind of go through, what will my career path be? And I knew it, and I worked really hard in college to make sure that I would set myself up to, keep doing it after. So I had some really great internships. I got to work for Sports Illustrated, which was just a turning point in terms of passion, not Sports Illustrated, I just met so many amazing people. And then after college, worked for The Ringer for a year. And then about a year ago or so, I took this job, and I've been here ever since.
That's awesome. And the Greenville News, but you're stationed in Columbia. Greenville obviously is a newspaper out of Greenville, South Carolina, but you're stationed in Columbia.
Yes. So I'm the only South Carolina reporter that we have in terms of covering University of South Carolina sports. Darian Carter is our Clemson reporter. And so I have coworkers that, are knowledgeable. They help out when they can, but a lot of us kind of have our own beats. But I'm based out of Columbia, even though my paper's in Greenville.
So in media, there are so many different avenues that you can take. I took the TV route. You chose print. Why was print journalism the one that really spoke to you?
Well, it's funny because in high school, I always thought I was a horrible writer. English writing and just kind of a very simple, straightforward, teaching kind of one size fits all method just didn't really work for me. And then I realized that I really do love writing. It's just a different type of writing that I like, because obviously English essays are a lot different than feature stories. And I mean, I do love things like this. I love hopping on, whether that's us on camera or podcasting or things like that. But just sports writing felt like just so me in some ways, and I do truly like the process of it, and editing and publishing and kind of what happens in between and behind the scenes.
So what has this first year in Columbia, because when did you get here in Columbia?
I moved down like the last weekend of March.
Okay.
So technically my first day was like the 2 days in between the Final Four and the national championship.
Oh, okay.
And so they had already sent people to cover, when Emily Adams, who had the job before me, when she was gone, they had Evan fill in, and I'll get into that kind of when I talk about USA Today Network. But long story short, I was kind of technically working from home the national championship, doing sort of behind the scenes stuff while everyone was on site.
So what has this first year been like for you? Because, I've been in Columbia almost to 9 years, and I've been 9 years, not quite a decade yet. And I've seen a lot of people come and go, but you really have made a splash in your first year, which is not easy to do. So what has this first year been like for you as a journalist?
Well, it's definitely pushed a lot. It's pushed me a lot because, like you said, I knew nobody coming in here. This was truly a job where I didn't know any of my coworkers. I didn't really, obviously I knew of Dawn. Dawn did not know me. I knew I was coming in to cover SEC football in South Carolina, and I'd never done anything like that before. So it was new. The first, couple months I was like, wow, I don't know anyone. Developing sources felt nearly impossible just because I kind of felt like a fish out of water a little bit. Moving in from Massachusetts, where everyone kind of just assumed I was from Boston. It was just very new. But at the same time, I quickly learned how great everyone was. And it was different in, a lot of great ways. I learned so much covering football right away because the timeline, I got here, I helped out with baseball last year. And then it was sort of like, okay, I have to sort of figure out what to write about in June, July, and then just dive into football in August. And I'm grateful that I had football first. I think I'm so familiar with basketball that I think if I started with that, I would have maybe not challenged myself as much as I did in terms of developing, story ideas and getting to know SEC football and everything it entails.
Well, in this social media world that we live in, it's very competitive. It's hard to, make not viral moments, but just to really make things happen. So it's a very competitive world in print journalism. When you're looking for stories that you want people to read, you want good headlines, you want people to dive in, you want people to know the community, you want people to know your writing. What are the types of stories that you look for?
That's a good question. And honestly, it's funny because when I think about, I applied for this job in January and didn't, hear back officially till mid-February. So I was just basically looking at your Twitter for months, trying to keep up with the team and know that if I were to have to move in the drop of a hat and kind of dive into it, I'd be prepared. But to actually answer your question, I feel like I love feature writing. That's sort of what I always try to look for. And it's sort of the weird facts that you hear that really separate things. Like a lot of coaches, even if they don't, give a funny story all the time, you kind of can luck out with noticing the very small side comments they make, or just little things that might hint at things that you can sort of try to dive in deeper. I also think that social media, obviously, it's tricky. There's a lot that I don't like about it, but at the same time, you learn a lot, and everything is sort of fair game what you hear. I've truthfully, to be candid, found really great story ideas just stalking parents and figuring out what they posted about, when their kid was in 7th grade, and then ultimately that was a game changer in their athletic career and things like that. So a lot of information is public. It kind of just, you figure out how to find it. And I like to sort of figure out maybe the niche things that people don't really know upon looking or thinking about the athlete.
And it is such an art, because in newspaper writing or digital writing, whichever medium that is, you guys, the words are really what matter, and telling a good story. So for TV, the visuals come first. Is it visually compelling, because you want people to watch, whereas you want people to read, and the words are really what's so important. So how do you ever know oh, this is a good story, this one's gonna hit big?
It really is. You hear stories that's oh, the story that you think is horrible everyone loves, and then the story that you loved your editor rips apart, and
or no one reads it or watches it or whatever. whatever.
Oh, the worst is checking the views on a certain story and you're just like, dang it.
You're like, I love that one.
Yeah, exactly. I do think that you sort of have to learn, like, every story that you write is going to matter differently to somebody. Somebody is going to have the same level of care. I also think I have to be realistic, like reading in 2025, like not a lot of people like to do it.
Yeah.
And working in print, it's some, I don't want to say it feels like a dying art, but it definitely is tricky. There's a lot of really great ways to tell stories nowadays, and competing with visual media is obviously difficult because, heck, I love it. That's how I consume a lot of it, obviously. So there's been definitely times where I think the Dawn timeout story that I wrote, I had that idea for about a year, honestly, and it was just sort of figuring out how I was going to pull it off and if I was. And so when it definitely came to be, I was editing it, honestly, on the ride down to Tampa. It was very poetic, like putting in the last touches and everything like that. And I was happy the way it came out because it's a difficult story to tell. It's tricky to tell within a certain word count. Obviously, you don't want to say too much and lose a reader. That's definitely something us writers worry about in terms of kind of your question about wording and things like that. Like you give too much detail in one area, you might completely lose the plot a little bit. So I'm grateful how some of these feature stories that I've written have turned out because it seems like people at least read them all the way through.
And for people listening, so going off of that, you do have to write your stories within a certain length. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, every editor is different. I personally, every paper is different. I've worked for companies where, they allow 3,000 word stories, and I've worked for companies where they kind of max you out at 700, 800. It depends on the topic. It definitely depends on sources. Typically, the amount of sources you have kind of can indicate your word count. If you're only talking to, one player, it's probably not gonna fly if you have a 1,500 word story. But I've had features where I've had like 4 or 5 voices, and that sort of allows you to have more flexibility in terms of word count.
And how many stories do you have to write a week? Is there did they want you to write a story every day, or is it just like 2 or 3 a week? How does that work?
I get that question a lot. I will say, to specify, like, USA Today owns my paper. Mm-hmm. And so my editor is also in charge of 9 other different papers. So my coworkers, they cover Ole Miss, Tennessee, the Titans. And so within the USA Today Sports Network, we have guidelines. And so it's mainly for, like, event. So for example, like we have playbooks for the draft. We have specific directions to follow when there's, a bigger, more like sport-wide thing happening. I don't have a quota in terms of, I need to reach, this amount of stories per week. I definitely put pressure on myself. Like life feels weird if I don't publish a story every day.
Yeah.
In the off season, I'm coming to terms with relaxing a little bit and just trying to not
take the vacations, Lulu. Take it. This is our only chance to do so.
Exactly. We have like 2 months. And somehow in my head, I'm like, nope, don't take a day off. But I don't necessarily have a specific amount I have to write, but I do sort of feel like I have a pretty good expectation on the understandings of, what I should be writing.
Yeah, and that USA Today network, that was kind of our next topic because there's so many different companies within media and all that. USA Today is obviously a big one, and they have, what do you call it, like a family tree almost everywhere, and the Greenville News is one of those. And there's also, and I also know a lot of people are interested in like voting. So like for me, I'm an AP voter, and for women's basketball, so I'm part of the AP poll. But like the USA Today, you guys have your own thing that you guys do, your own awards, your own rankings and all that, and that's kind of what you guys are part of. So USA Today, is it just awesome being part of a huge network like that, because you guys do have a huge reach and a huge influence on many sports.
I love it. And to kind of talk, I feel like in this industry, you should always be learning. I was actually having a conversation this morning with a coworker and saying like, no two journalists should ever be the same, but it's always good to kind of mirror some actions with people. And I think you learn a lot from your coworkers. And I love that I can talk to a Tennessee writer, an Ole Miss writer, a NHL writer. Like we have a bunch of NHL papers in our network or teams, and I think it's important to kind of have different perspectives. And as great as it is talking to all the South Carolina reporters, like knowing that I have other people to bounce ideas off of is really great. And I'm really fortunate that I have quite literally a network wide of people who are all different ages, all different kind of levels or experiences within this industry. And you just learn so much through those conversations.
Yeah, and figuring out what kind of journalist you are and what kind of journalist you want to be is also kind of a learning curve, because I think I'm a much different journalist than when I first started. I don't think when I first started, I knew what I was doing or knew what I wanted to be. And you do figure out your strengths, and you're like, okay, that person's really good at that. I can't do that. You know what I mean? But I'm good at this. And so I'm just going to lean into this aspect of it. So it does take a little bit to figure out where you thrive in what is a very competitive industry.
Totally. And I also think it's important nowadays, especially with NIL and a lot of things, coming into this, I had pretty little experience, I want to say, requesting official documents. I know that sounds so small, but you and I, even in the last year, I've run into instances where we've had to kind of go to South Carolina for certain things or request, public documents. And you learn so much just from asking other people who maybe that is their specialty. They're really great with working, with people in, court, the law, people who are really great with working with SIDs and ADs and things like that. You're never going to come into a job, fully prepared. That's kind of what I love about this industry is that no 2 days are the same, but also no two jobs are the same, even if they're quite literally the same job description. Everything's going to be different. So I do like the fact that you're able to really discover kind of what you don't know and what you do know, and you're able to find the balance between, loving what you love and learning based on what you don't know.
And I always tell people, so in our industry, at least in TV, we have what they call TV DMA rankings, which is it ranks every city based on basically how big they are or how many households they have to watch. And I think Columbia in the TV world is in the 70s somewhere, Charlotte's in the top 25, Raleigh, and then of course New York, LA, Chicago are the top 3, Houston, they're big, but I think Columbia's 78. But for Columbia, I always tell people, in sports, Columbia, I think, is a top 30 market. I think there are so many opportunities for sports journalists in this market. So when I tell people that, TV journalists that are coming in here, and they look at that, I'm like, don't pay attention to that 78 or whatever it is, because you are going to get a lot of experience in this market. And I don't know about you, but I feel like I've grown so much as a journalist because it's just continuous opportunities.
Absolutely. That's really well put. And I think that Don Staley has obviously a huge part in that. But even, we were talking about the WNBA earlier. It's not every college team is guaranteed to, have draft picks the way that South Carolina has. And that allows me to, cover the WNBA a little bit. There's different levels, within college athletics and different college reporting. But I've just found that, a day here is always going to be different. You're always going to kind of be like, oh, I can, dip my foot in that today because this job allows me to, because there's so much going on here in terms of SEC football with Dawn, with now softball. There's so many powerful programs with a lot of history and a lot of modern history forming and a lot of bright futures.
Yeah. Well, that was the intro. And now let's get to what everybody is, a lot of people I think are tuning into this for. But we're going to take a quick time out on South Carolina sideline. Up next, though, Lulu is going to take us through breaking that MiLaysia Fulwiley transfer story, one of the stories of the year in Gamecock athletics. And she's going to take us through how that entire process works right after this. All right, Lulu. Well, I know a lot of people that are clicking on this, watching this, are really clicking on it probably to get some behind the scenes information on this story. Because one thing I want this podcast to do is to give people insight into how our industry works, how we do things. And I know one of the stories of the year has been MiLaysia Fulwiley transferring from South Carolina to LSU. Well, I know that headline was everywhere, but Lulu is the one that broke that story. So I know, obviously, from what you can tell us, how do you go about breaking a story that is that big?
Yeah, that was a crazy Friday afternoon.
Crazy.
Truly. I can say I woke up that morning and had no idea I was about to break that story.
Really? So it was that day?
It was that day. I can say that. It all happened incredibly quickly. And I'm saying that because I'm not the type of reporter that sort of gets, when people talk about runner's high and you're running that, I don't get that when I'm breaking news. And that's, I love reporters who do, and I take a lot, it's incredibly valuable to break news and to kind of have that skill, but that's not necessarily my thing. That's not where I kind of thrive. But that story sort of, I don't want to say fell into my lap. I think with the transfer portal, all of us were being incredibly careful. I can't speak for other reporters, but I was getting a lot of different information, some that turned out to be true, some that turned out to not be true. I think a lot of focus after Latson transferred was obviously on MiLaysia. And I mean, let's be real, fans were saying that she should transfer, all season long. A lot of people wanted to write their own narratives about Dawn and MiLaysia's relationship. And for me, it was tricky because I had written that feature in December talking to Dawn and Steph Curry and MiLaysia's mom about South Carolina. And I do believe that they were honest in saying that, like, this was the program that was for her. That doesn't mean things, won't change in the next 6 months in the era of NIL and the transfer portal. Nothing's ever going to be the same. And I don't think that coaches are able, Lamont Paris, I believe, said this like a couple weeks ago to us, or maybe it was just last week, like, you plan a roster for a year. So I was kind of having that in mind, like, whatever Dawn has after the buzzer, after the UConn game, is probably not what she's going to have in a year. Maybe not within a week, maybe not within a month. I was sort of looking at, okay, with the transfer portal, who makes the most sense to leave? And I was sort of dedicating my time to that because I think that names and money and, NIL deals and things like that were getting thrown around because everyone likes to talk, especially on Twitter and things like that. And the Fulwiley story just sort of, I don't want to say came to be, but it definitely wasn't something that I was hunting down in the sense of, oh, I heard this from XYZ. It was more so, oh, this is really legit and this is about to happen. And I made sure that I had sources that I trusted and that were legitimate before I broke the story. So it was a mix of reporting and going about my reporting and obviously kind of talking to people. And I had built sources all season long, but it was also not like, okay, right after UConn, a lot of people were speculating like she's gone. It wasn't that process for me where I spent, the time in between she transferred or when I broke the story in the national championship trying to prove that she was leaving. It was more so of, okay, this is someone I trust who is saying this. Let me go through my sources. And that's how it all came to be. Honestly, within 30 minutes. Like I was about to have a call with my editor about something completely unrelated. And then I called him and I was like, I think I'm about to, like, I have to break this. Like, it wasn't like, how do we go about this? But of course it was a process that I very much value and respect and kind of have to go by how he wanted to approach it. And truthfully, like, I had a pit in my stomach because I was
it's a big one. Like, you can't get it wrong.
You can't get it wrong at all. And it was also like the competitive aspect of me. Of course, we're all in this. I was like, it's going to stink if 2 minutes before I hit publish, somebody else gets this. And so selfishly, it was a very cool career moment, quite literally seeing SportsCenter credit me. Like, I saw a tweet that was like, how the heck did the Greenville News break this? And I was like, support local journalism, man. I'm not surprised in the fact that I did because I'm around the team all the time. Like, I think a lot of people, obviously national outlets have really great sources and that's why they're able to break news, but there's a great benefit in our jobs in the fact that we're in Columbia, we're around these athletes all the time. They know us, we know them, and it definitely helped me out in that situation.
And for people who are listening and watching, when you break a story that big, it's not like one person's texting Lulu and she's like, okay, great, let's publish it. I mean, she's got to vet all this. She's got to confirm it with so many people to make sure it's right. And I know too, sometimes it's one of those stories, at least for me, I don't really get shocked by news anymore at this point in my career. I've seen so many things come and go. And like you said, after every single season, you look at the transfer portal because usually in this day and age, somebody's leaving, whether it's someone at the very end of the bench or a superstar on the team. So when this was happening, I don't, like I said, I don't have issues or like really emotions, with all because we do follow these teams so closely. MiLaysia, though, was a tough one for me because I've covered her since she was in 7th grade and I just seen, her journey this whole way. So I was like, man, this is how it's ending. I didn't see it coming this way. And you actually texted me, I think like 5 minutes before you were going to publish it. And you were like, Matt, I got a big one. Like get on social media in the next 5 minutes and I was like, oh, I wonder what it is. I was like, it's good. I was like going through a list. I was like, is it this or this or this? I did not think it was going to be MiLaysia. So how do you kind of separate like, oh wow, this is going to get a big reaction from like, I just got to do my job.
Yeah. It was hard. That was especially hard. I also think like another reason, like I I will never want to break injury news.
Yeah.
That's like the worst news to have to break. And I'm not saying anyone who reports on injury news is a bad person, obviously, but that kind of the heartbreak of realizing that you're reporting on something that's a devastating thing. And in college, it's like to a 19-year-old. So with MiLaysia, I've grown close with her in the sense of like she respects me as a journalist, and I feel as though I can, in an open locker room, get a good quote out of her because I think she knows my intentions and things like that. And so it was a hard one to break, especially because I knew the conversation it was going to create. And I'm not here to, defend Dawn Staley. That's not my job.
Yeah.
I'm an unbiased reporter. I can't sit here and create certain narratives that, make South Carolina look good if that's not the truth. But truthfully, like, I tweeted that and then just kind of like walked away. I was like, I'm going to let everyone, like, my phone, I got a lot of texts that were like rest in peace, your notifications today and things like that. And it's like, I just let everyone talk, like, around in my mentions, out of my, it was a conversation that was going to be had because a lot of people expected it. A lot of people didn't. I think that in general, it's tough. Like, it broke my mom's heart. My mom's favorite player, like, ever is MiLaysia Fulwiley. So, like, you see the effect that these players have on fans, and it's hard to be the one that obviously is like, they're leaving, but at the same time, like, that is my job, and not reporting that when I found the information would not have been doing my job.
Yeah, and she's from here, which adds a whole other element because everyone here has watched her from elementary school, all the Columbia natives. So I think that there was an emotional aspect of this story that made it probably harder, I'm assuming. But before we wrap this up, how many clicks did that story get? I'm really curious. Do you know off the top of your head?
I know that it got close to 80,000 views on my actual read the story online through Google. I think I saw at one point that the tweet itself was up to 2 million views, which is crazy.
Big time.
So it was a talk. For perspective, I have a journalism Instagram. I try to keep a lot of my private life private. Not that I think I'm a celebrity or anything. I'm just, the older you get, you value social media privacy. And I think I went from maybe 100 followers to 500.
Oh, wow.
Because everybody was posting Bleacher Report, Just Women's Sports, ESPN, a lot of people, and I appreciate it, they were tagging and crediting me. They were Lulu Kesin reported this
as
first.
They should.
Thank you. Which is a very cool feeling, but it also it really kind of put in perspective, wow, this was everyone's actual first time hearing this news. Because, the way that Twitter feeds are too, I don't see everything right away. Obviously, sometimes they'll say 8 hours ago I see a tweet that I'm like, how did I not see that?
Yeah.
Just it's not always the most recent news first. So I think that really kind of drove the point home of wow, this is I'm fully the one breaking this news to a lot of people about a player that was really well liked and well received.
And it's stressful, but also cool. It's kind of both emotions when you do a story that big. You're all the anxiety, but I'm sure you were wow, this is why I got into this.
Yeah, definitely. It was a mix. It was funny. A mentor that I really, really value his opinion, called me after. And I think having that conversation with him really kind of hammered the happiness home. And again, it wasn't I was yay, I'm benefiting off of, MiLaysia leaving. Had this been a different storyline, let's be real, I can't be she went to the portal. A lot of people go to the portal. I wasn't reporting on, her getting an ACL tear that I was the first one to talk about. That wouldn't have the same reaction. And so I was able to have sort of that pride and feel happy about what I was able to accomplish as a journalist. And yeah, a lot of people were telling me to go get steak that night and go to a nice dinner and celebrate.
Turn the phone off and just you've done enough for that day. Well, is there anything else you want to say about this story? Because I know it has been one of the biggest stories in our market this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just add I don't want to be cryptic, but don't believe everything you said online. I really don't want to get into, I know some details in terms of how everything went down within the program, and I don't feel like I'm the person to speak on that. I do think that eventually somebody will, and I don't know all the confirmed details, so that's also why I'm not, kind of like you said about sources, you hear one thing, okay, it's I trust that person, but I'm not going to publicly repeat that. And so there's a lot of narratives about MiLaysia and her going to LSU and sort of how she visited and everything like that. I think what really happened will eventually come out, but there's a lot we don't know, and there's a lot that we are seeing and maybe believing, and I'm curious to sort of see when exactly things come to light, and I'm curious, honestly, to see how she works out at LSU.
Yeah, and it's one of those stories that's like not over. It's going to be a continuous thing. The next time we see Dawn, I'm sure she'll be asked about it, and then when MiLaysia starts playing at LSU and they play each other, it's going to be, it's just going to be a continuous story for the next 2 years. I mean, when they play at the SEC tournament and they come here to Columbia, it's just going to be a continuous story. And I think as journalists, you also continue to think, where does the story go from here? What's next? And you have to continue to move the story along if the story is still there. Well, that is all of the MiLaysia Fulwiley talk for today, but we're going to take another time out here on South Carolina Sideline. I got to watch I talk with my hands. I'm hitting my mic a bunch today. We're going to take another break. And before she broke the Fulwiley story, Lulu went viral, but for a very different reason. We're going to talk a funny behind-the-scenes story up next here on South Carolina Sideline. All right, well, Lulu Kesin has been in the news for a lot of different reasons over the past few months. Before the Fulwiley stuff, Lulu, you had a moment, I don't even know what to call this. It was a viral moment, but for kind of a crazy reason. We were at the SEC tournament. I still can't believe how viral this moment went. And you're eating mozzarella sticks in the media lunchroom. And Kim Mulkey is in a press conference. Can you please tell everybody what happened? Because I don't think you even saw this becoming what it became.
Absolutely not. Yes, I will give the full breakdown. I'll start by saying, like I was talking about, I work for USA Today. So it's very common when we're at, tournaments to help each other out. So I was staying late. I want to say it might have been, I can't remember honestly if it was South Carolina had already played and I was covering Ole Miss or Mississippi State or some game after, but LSU had been playing. And I was in the workroom and I was there. It was like 10 o'clock. Everyone had gone home and it was me, I want to say, it was right after the Texas LSU game because Danny, the Texas reporter, was in there with me. And it was like 10:30 at night. I'd probably covered maybe 3 games already, like that day. I was on story, like maybe number 10. And I was like, all right, I'm not in the press conference. And so for context, like for people who don't maybe understand like press rooms in those settings, I was not in front row with Kim Mulkey 5 feet ahead of me eating mozzarella sticks. I was not actively in her press conference. Like I was not covering her team, her game. Yeah. I was nowhere near. I don't want to say nowhere near, but I was very far away. I was not in her press conference. And so I'll say that because I got some hate with people assuming, and they're like, oh, she's right to call her out. She was eating in her press. I would never do that. No one would ever do that. That's not a thing. So I was minding my business, eating mozzarella sticks, and all of a sudden I hear Kim Mulkey say, is that media over there, or are they just eating? And I was like, oh, like, no way she could be talking about me. And so I look up and I'm typing and I have a mozzarella stick on a fork because you can't get grease. I'm a germaphobe, and also so like eating with my hands while working is like but also like I don't want to get a greasy keyboard. So I look up and everyone's looking at me and I was like, oh, like that's funny. Everyone else must be eating. No. There was not a single other person eating at that hour because like everyone was either done or gone home or just like employees waiting to like close down the tables. And so because I think that Twitter is funny, like I will say I would never have tweeted the video if I was offended. And I think a lot of people, like we'll probably get into like how many people wrote about the situation and how many people like put a negative spin on it. And I'm not going to like play dumb. Of course, that's always a potential when you tweet anything nowadays. But like I found it hilarious.
It was hilarious.
Absolutely hilarious.
And Kim wasn't she was just being like legitimately asking a question. Kim was doing nothing wrong. Let's clarify that too. Absolutely.
And I also like I didn't say this in my initial tweet, but like I was incredibly impressed with her eyesight. Like it was kind of dark, like the lighting wasn't great, and she did see it, and like I know it was me. I was the only one eating. Like I had the mozzarella sticks. Like we locked eyes, and then I sort of like made a face. I was just like, and then she like laughed. So I was like, okay, like that was a funny interaction, and I feel bad because Kim is one of the most talked about women in this industry, and she's obviously someone people kind of love to write like those little trending pieces about. I can't say that, I'm surprised that people tried to spin that moment, but I found it absolutely hilarious.
It was.
I'm still so impressed that she was able to spot that and do that, and I just thought it was really funny.
It was so funny, and Kim was having a good time, and like everyone, it was great. But then it felt like a Parks and Rec sketch where it was like started out funny, and then you see like national headlines of like Kim Mulkey like blasts like local reporter over mozzarella sticks, and we're over here like, what is going on? Like this was not a big deal. So Kim Mulkey did nothing wrong, you did nothing wrong. It was a funny moment, but also one of the more ridiculous like behind the scenes things I've seen unfold, because I was like, how did this become a national headline?
It was never ending, and truly, like, some outlets reach out to me like a week later about it, which I was also like I would never say this, but it was like, you're late, you know, like 100%. You're a week late on this. Like, yeah, okay, it was funny when someone posted about it 8 hours later, but like a week later I was kind of like, let's let this die. It was sad to see, some articles that how they were written, obviously, but like a lot of people I think really bought into like the humor aspect of it, because it truly was really funny. Like I didn't expect going into my first SEC tournament to have that happen. Everyone, obviously all you guys joked about that I need like an NIL deal with Farm Rich mozzarella sticks and stuff like that, but it was very funny, and I guess I should say like it was cool to see so many people like laugh with me about it. A lot of different reporters that like I truly admire and respect kind of like brought it up in a very like everyone realized like, oh, this is a really funny moment that you had with a really iconic coach. Like, not like, oh, celebrate it, but it was kind of nice to laugh about it.
Well, you never know. Hey, when you're in a press room, make sure you always know what's going on. You never know what's going to happen. Well, Lulu, we're going to wrap things up right after this. This has been a great conversation, but South Carolina Sideline taking one more time out. We'll wrap things up right after this. As we wrap up today's interview with our first guest here on South Carolina Sideline, Lulu Kesin of the Greenville News. Lulu, just how can people find you? How can they read your stuff? Because you're always asking great questions. You're always writing great articles. How can people find you?
That's so sweet. Pretty much all of my like usernames are Lulu Kesin. I have an Instagram, I think it's like lulu.kesin, that I occasionally post like behind the scenes or sort of work stuff on it. But obviously Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it nowadays, is where I tweet my stories regularly. And then if you just Google like the Greenville News, Lulu Kesin, all my articles should come up. You're able to obviously look under like staff writer and staff profile and sort of follow. I do have a newsletter. Like, it's a little bit of
flex on us.
It's a kind of a it's not like a personal thing, but I try to keep in touch. Like, I am incredibly grateful for my network of personal support that I have, and so I try to send stories in ways, because I have a lot of age difference in the people that read my stories. I have 85-year-olds and I have a 15-year-old, so I try to give my content in an easy to read way, and so I send newsletters now and then with my like favorite stories of the month or the week that I wrote.
Well, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you for coming in our podcast studio to be our first guest, to help us expand this podcast. I hope everyone that's watching, listening, has really enjoyed this conversation. Lulu is one of the best journalists in our market, and I will say that because I don't say that to everybody. I really like to give people props in this industry if they deserve it, and Lulu deserves it 100%. And you're going to keep doing good work. You're going to keep growing as a journalist. I can't wait to watch you grow in this industry, watch you and continue to, break ground in this industry and to write great stories. And I really, really, really appreciate you coming on our show.
Well, iron sharpens iron. I'm only good because you're so great. So thank you so much for the kind words. I love this beat. I love everyone that we work with. And
we are a family.
We are a family. Hey, we call you Father Dowell.
They do. That's how long I've been in this industry now. I used to be the young pup in the industry once upon a time.
Yeah, I kind of pull the age down a little bit. Everyone makes fun of me. Like Noah last night was like, what are you, 17? No.
No.
But truly, the kind words mean so much, and I love listening to you guys. So I'm honored that I was asked to be on the podcast.
Lulu Kesin of the Greenville News, thank you for coming on again. We will have more of South Carolina's Sideline with our next episode dropping on Tuesday, and then more guests dropping every single Thursday. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. South Carolina returning next week. We'll see you on Tuesday.